Welcome to Sizzle Fantasy Sports, the channel with the most sizzling hot fantasy takes and analysis, presented by your host, Gavin.
Rodgers clean pocket, throws the middle of the end zone. Devontae, touchdown, and a dagger!
How's it going, you guys? Welcome back to the SFS channel. My name's Gavin, and today I've got my first NFL mock draft following last Friday's blockbuster trades, which involved the Eagles, Dolphins, and 49ers moving around to the top of the board and exchanging lots of picks. If you guys remember back to this past weekend, Eric and I recorded his initial takes on things, and we talked through his first mock draft. But today's my mock here. We're going to be talking through my thought process on what happened last week, and I'll be going over how those trades impact the top of this draft board. But if you guys are new around here to the SFS channel, there has never been a better time to join this community. We are dropping the SFS website on Thursday, April 1st, for those of you guys watching this video. So if you guys are new around here, make sure to subscribe and turn that bell on so you guys are notified right away when that stuff comes out. There's going to be a ton of awesome football content on there. My fantasy draft guide pre-ordering will be open, and some extra community stuff that will be interactive for you guys. So I couldn't be more excited to drop that for you guys. Also, check out my social medias at the top corner of your screen for more SFS content. There's a lot of talking, but you guys, there's a lot of exciting stuff going around in the football world right now. And for us here on the SFS channel, there is tons of exciting things in the future. So without further ado, we're going to stop yapping at you guys. Let's get right into today's video and the first overall pick. All right, you guys, here we are at the top of the board. This is the Mock Draft Monday weekly routine. Well, this video won't be coming out on a Monday because of the trades that happened last week. We put out an extra mock and things got delayed a little bit, but here we are on a Wednesday. First overall pick, I say this every single week. It's standard. It's the consensus pick. Trevor Lawrence will be a Jaguar. Urban Meyer, their head coach, even commented on it recently and said this is the direction the organization is headed. No surprise here, like I said. Trevor Lawrence will be a Jaguar come April 27th or 28th, whenever round one is. I forget the exact date off the top of my head, but this one's not a shocker here. No one is surprised to see this pick on the board. Trevor Lawrence, he's even in the jersey here at 1. Then at number 2 here, I've pretty much locked in on this pick as well. This will probably be the direction I go in almost all of my mocks the rest of the way here. The New York Jets, I've got them taking Zach Wilson, the quarterback from BYU. He had a really impressive pro day. I know he's throwing on air, but the throws he was making in the body positions he was throwing from were very impressive. I like what this guy brings to the table from an athletic perspective and the work he can do outside of the pocket. I like his ability to ad-lib and do things outside the playbook. So Zach Wilson here at 2. I think he also throws a really pretty football. I think the fit is nice for New York. They just have to find a trading partner to move off of Sam Darnold with, or look to go in another direction there. At number 3, this is the first big pick of this mock, I would say, that is differing from my previous episodes here on the channel. If you guys want to go check those out, of course, you can go over to my channel and view some of those previous mocks, but just keep in mind that lots of news comes out after all these mocks, so some stuff might come off as a bit irrelevant, such as free agent signings that have addressed team needs and whatnot. But here at the 3rd selection, I have the 49ers, who moved up with 3 first-round picks to attain this 3rd overall pick, taking Trey Lance, the quarterback out of North Dakota State. I think this one, there's a lot of ways San Fran could go here. Obviously, Mac Jones has been getting a ton of hype lately, and a lot of experts have kind of honed in on him in the spotlight here recently as the guy that they think that Shanahan and John Lynch are going to take here at that 3rd spot. You've also got Justin Fields, who just had a pro day yesterday as well, who they could take with this pick. I think it's Trey Lance, though. At least that's where we're going to go in this mock draft. I like to explore different scenarios here, so I'm definitely not ruling out those other options. But for the sake of this video, we are going with Trey Lance here at the 3rd pick. I think that, the 49ers have verbally committed to Jimmy Garoppolo. I think there is no question that he will be around and the starter for at least the first half of this season. I don't see another quarterback coming in here and taking that job over prior to the NFL trade deadline, because I think the 49ers are contenders right now and they still want to try and win this season. But they invested 3 draft picks into moving up to this number 3 overall spot. I don't think you do that unless you're going for a player who has a tremendously high ceiling and I think can absolutely thrive in Kyle Shanahan's offense. Do I think that Mac Jones might be a good fit here at 3? Yes, I do. But I think when you're moving up and using 3 first-round picks worth of draft capital, you're going for a guy who the sky's the limit for. Trey Lance has not only a huge arm and really, really great potential in that aspect of his game, but he's also got wheels. He's mobile and he can use his legs to get things done. I think that Trey Lance is an incredibly intelligent prospect. He called his own protections at North Dakota State. And while the knock on him has been lack of tape, he's a bit raw of a prospect. That's fine. You've got a great offensive-minded head coach. You've got yourself a year or at least half a year to sit and learn from an already successful NFL quarterback. And I think that just those things and the situation paired together makes this an incredibly beneficial situation for both parties. And I think that Trey Lance and the 49ers can benefit greatly from this pick here at 3. Then at number 4 here, if I'm being honest, the Falcons might be the most uncomfortable team to select with at this number 4 overall spot. I would like to see them trade back and maybe have another team move up for a quarterback. There is a real potential that we could see 4 quarterbacks go back to back to back to back here at the top of the board. But for this mock draft, there's already been a lot of movement in the last week or so. So I'm just going to keep things the way they are and not include any extra trades in this mock. I'm going to have the Falcons staying put and at 4 selecting Penei Sewell, the tackle out of Oregon. Matt Ryan, he has been under a lot of duress as of late. And when I look at the other players on the board, this is a very offensive-heavy draft class. At 4, I think the weakness of the Falcons is actually defense because of how many weapons they already have in Atlanta. But if we're looking at the board, at 4, not really any defensive players in this class warrant a top 4 pick. I think that you look at the Falcons' skill positions, and yeah, Julio's getting older and up there, but he is still very capable of being a star in the league. Calvin Ridley in his own right is a very, very good wide receiver. And Hayden Hurst, even at the tight end position, it's not really that urgent of a need if you want to go a direction like a Kyle Pitts. So I don't think pass catcher is extremely needed here, but the one dominant position on the board that they don't currently have an elite player at is offensive line. Penei Sewell can come in there and he can play left or right tackle. It doesn't really matter. He has the athletic intangibles to be a beast in the run game and to mature as a pass blocker and really develop his traits there. I think Penei Sewell might be one of the best prospects to come out in the last 5-10 years here in Atlanta if you want to stick with Matt Ryan, because I believe that contractually and from just an organizational standpoint, you're kind of tied to him for at least a couple more seasons. I don't think quarterback's the play here, so for that reason, I go Penei Sewell here at 4, who also notably can improve that run game, which I think was a big weakness for them last season. Then at 5 here, this is a situation I haven't explored yet, but like I said, I don't always pick the player that I think is per se the home run hit or the right fit, but I think that these are players that we could see go to these teams and things that we could see play out in this draft. At 5, like that. With that being said, I have the Cincinnati Bengals selecting Ja'Marr Chase, the wide receiver out of LSU, and their quarterback Joe Burrow's former favorite target as a member of that football team in which he led to a national championship. I've said this before on the channel. I think if the Bengals go anywhere other than offensive line, they are doing it wrong in this draft. But I have heard some very valid concerns from the Cincinnati Bengal media that, with Penei Sewell and this particular mock being off the board here at 5, and with them already having an undersized tackle in Jonah Williams on their roster, they might not want to go out there and pick a second one in Rashawn Slater, who is also kind of lacking in the size department. Like I said, you've got Williams on the roster, and while protection was a huge issue for Burrow last season, they did bring in Reef from the Vikings this offseason, and while I don't think he's that great of a player coming from a fan of an NFC North team, I do think that at least stifles that unit a little bit. Reportedly, Joe Burrow is actually kind of playing his hands here to try and get Ja'Marr Chase to be the selection for the Bengals here at 5, and he's actually kind of vying for them to make this pick, reportedly. So Ja'Marr Chase, that's the situation we're going with here. I think they've already got 2 solid wide receivers on the roster, but Ja'Marr Chase certainly would be a great connection to have with his former college quarterback at 5. Then at 6 here, the Dolphins, with the top receiver talent off the board already, bringing in Will Fuller via free agency, already having Devontae Parker and Preston Williams, two big body wide receivers on the roster. I think they pass on a guy like Devontae Smith or Jalen Waddle here at 6, and they go tight end with Kyle Pitts. You've already got Mike Gesicki, who's very solid, but go out there, make this offense all about giving Tua the weapons he needs to be successful. Kyle Pitts is basically a huge wide receiver playing tight end. He's an offensive mismatch. Linebackers are going to be too slow to cover him. Safeties are going to be too small to contest balls thrown his way. I think Kyle Pitts can really take Tua's game to the next level, and he will show the Dolphins whether or not he is the future of that franchise. At number 7, the Lions have Rashawn Slater fall right into their laps here. This is a pick I think makes very, very versatile opportunities for that offensive line. Rashawn Slater can play literally all 5 positions on that O-line. I think he can be a very solid pass protector. I've said this before in almost all my mock drafts. He is the most NFL-ready offensive line prospect this season. I think that he's more ready day one than even a Penei Sewell is to walk in and start for a football team and have an immediate impact. With that being said, do I think that the heights of his game will be better than what we see from Penei Sewell? No, but Rashawn Slater is no slouch in his own right. The Lions could really use some interior offensive line talent or even someone to play right tackle opposite of Taylor Decker. So there's a lot of things that they could use very well with this Rashawn Slater pick. I think the Lions would be very, very grateful to have him fall to 7. Then at number 8 here, the Carolina Panthers. I've got them taking one of the top 4 quarterbacks on my list here to fall to them at number 8. Justin Fields just had his pro day for Ohio State on Tuesday, but here he is going 8 to the Panthers. I've actually typically had Trey Lance go after Justin Fields, but based off what I've seen at pro days, based off of what's being talked about around the league and from NFL insiders, what we're hearing from teams and their preferences, Trey Lance might actually be ahead of Justin Fields on some boards. I can see it. I definitely understand why there is some hesitation to not only Justin Fields, but Mac Jones. You look at Ohio State and Alabama, they don't typically have successful NFL quarterbacks because in some aspects, they don't really run a pro-style offense. I think that's maybe not necessarily the case for Mac Jones at Alabama this year. But when you look at Ohio State, they've got a lot of versatility, athletic quarterbacks and guys like JT Barrett. Dwayne Haskins didn't really turn out. He's more of a pocket passer. But the list goes on and on. Cardale Jones of successful college quarterbacks at Ohio State who didn't transition and develop in the NFL. So there's reason to be concerned about Justin Fields here, but I do think he does have a great arm talent. I do think he is very mobile. He ran a 4.44 40. That's very, very fast. I think there's only 2 quarterbacks of all time who have ran a faster 40-yard dash than Justin Fields did. And regardless of my rambling about Justin Fields and the potential knocks on him, I do still think he has the ability to be a very successful NFL quarterback. I think what the Panthers are doing in Carolina is they are building a football team the right way. Teddy Bridgewater is a true professional. He is a very solid quarterback to learn from, and I think he could teach Justin Fields a lot of useful tricks of the NFL game to help him become that next dominant player for the Panthers. I think that Justin Fields could be really good for this team. I believe in Matt Rule and what David Tepper and that organization are doing. I think that offense is very solid, and there's also a lot of good pieces around him to help him be successful. At number 9 then here, I have the Denver Broncos going a direction that I've had them go in one previous mock draft, but I think would actually be a very, very solid pickup for them. Mac Jones, he's my least favorite of the top 5 quarterbacks in this draft class. Like I said, I'm completely aware of all the Mac Jones hype going on right now. I know that people are saying that the 49ers are favorites to pick him at 3. I think that might be true that they're interested in Mac Jones, but I think that the 49ers, unless they had 3 or 4 quarterbacks they liked, would not move up to the number 3 spot, which in a typical draft class that isn't this quarterback strong, you don't really know who's going to be there. So I think the 49ers moved up with the intention of them being okay with taking Mac Jones at 3, which tells me he's either their 3rd or 4th ranked quarterback in this class, because I truly don't think he'd be their first choice at that number 3 pick, but I do think they may be comfortable taking him there. Nonetheless, though, I have him falling down here to 9 with the Denver Broncos. I think that when you look at Drew Lock, he does have a nice arm talent. He has a big arm, rather. and he can sling the rock, but he does come off as a bit careless. He's a bit loose with the football, and turnovers are an issue. This Broncos roster is already very solid. They have a lot of veteran leaders, especially on the defensive side of the ball, that can make plays and help you win a football game. When you look at Mac Jones, he might be the most developed and already pro-ready quarterback in this draft class. I certainly think of the big 5 QBs, he has the lowest ceiling, because while he does have quick ability to read and scan the field in the pocket and get rid of the football on time, he isn't the most athletic guy, and in terms of him being able to escape the pocket and move out and scramble, that part of his game is very limited, and in my eyes, that limits his ceiling. However, I think the Broncos are the perfect fit for him here at 9. I think when you look around the football field, there is so many options to go with the football. Courtland Sutton's coming back off injury. Jerry Jeudy was one of the best wide receiver prospects in last year's draft class, and he had a down year, I'd say, for his expectations. KJ Hamler, the second-round pick, he could be a stud if he can stay healthy. Noah Fant, also a very good option. Melvin Gordon out of the backfield. There's a lot of places that Mac Jones can go with the football. One of the things I've knocked Mac Jones about isn't necessarily that he has shown us that he's incapable of making big plays on his own or throwing in tight windows, but in college he didn't really have to. At least falling to the Broncos at 9 here, I think the skill players around him allow me to kind of overlook that and have high hopes and expectations for him here in Denver. At number 10 then here, I have something I haven't done in a mock draft yet, and that's have J.C. Horn be my first cornerback off the board here. I think that I actually talked about this 2 mocks ago. Without a doubt, if Caleb Farley was not injured 10 times out of 10, I'm taking Caleb Farley here as the first corner off the board. But the procedure he had done on his back has been talked about as a somewhat significant surgery and something that can really hold players back and cause long roads to recovery. So I think there's some significant reason for concern here. J.C. Horn also had a fantastic pro day. His measurables are great, and what he did in college is very impressive. I think Dallas just needs another shutdown corner, or at least a guy who can act as the number 1 corner. Trayvon Diggs is really nice. He's a ball hawk, but he did show that he can get burnt a lot in coverage. He does make plays, like I mentioned, but he has given up his fair share of big ones as well. I think J.C. Horn comes into the league a lot like, or at least similarly in his prospect profile to Jalen Ramsey. I think the fit here at 10 is really nice, and J.C. Horn could be a star in this league. At number 11 here, the New York Giants. I struggled to figure out which direction I wanted to go with this pick, but I ended up going Kwity Paye, the edge rusher out of Michigan. I think the Giants had a really great offseason, if I'm being quite honest. They really addressed all of their needs in some shape or form here that they had coming into this offseason, so it gives them a lot of versatility here and the ability to take the best player available at this number 11 spot. I do think, though, Kwity Paye here, he is the best pass rusher in this class, in my opinion, so that's why I would take him here. To be honest, having an extra pass rusher can never hurt. That defensive front is already very solid. Your linebacking core is decent, and they continue to inject players into that secondary to try and bolster that unit. I think you go out here, pick up Kwity Paye, and see if that defense can just become a top 5 unit and just an unblockable unit up front. That offense addressed a lot of needs here. Kenny Golladay was a huge signing. You've already got some nice pieces around there. Evan Ingram, Saquon Barkley coming back off injury. They've made this season about Daniel Jones and figuring out whether or not he is the guy. I could see New York going wide receiver here and addressing that need, but for this mock, we're going defensive end here with Kwity Paye. Then at number 12, the last pick involved in that trade where basically the Dolphins moved back and then back up with the Eagles here. I've got them taking Devontae Smith out of Alabama. I think Devontae Smith is the best fit for the wide receiver position left on the board. I think Jamar Chase would be the ideal option here at 12, but I don't think he'll be around here. Jalen Reagor was a decent pick last year out of TCU. I think he's a fine talent. I think he'll have a nice NFL career. But when I look at Jalen Reagor, the first thing that comes to mind is not wide receiver 1, and I think that's what the Eagles are really missing right now. They've got a solid tight end core. I've mocked them going Kyle Pitts and moving off of Zach Ertz previously, but I think it's really important that they address some sort of a pass-catching position to improve the unit that Jalen Hurts has to work with. Devontae Smith is a little bit more of a guy who can run the full route tree. He's more of a polished and complete wide receiver in comparison to Rager, who can fly down the field, but he doesn't necessarily run all of the routes that I think you'd like him to as your number one receiver on a football team. So for that reason, I think the short and intermediate routes, Devontae Smith can thrive in that asset of the game, and I think that he would be a great fit here at 12 for the Eagles. Then at 13, I've got Micah Parsons out of Penn State heading to the Chargers here to play in Los Angeles. I think that the linebacker is a huge need for the Chargers right now. When I looked at their depth chart there, it is weak. They've lost guys to free agency. Really, the only guy that they have solidified in that spot is Kenneth Murray, their first-round pick last year. But I think you have to go back and invest more capital into this position group. Parsons is a guy who can blitz the quarterback off the edge. He comes down hard in the run game, and he is able to make some big plays in the hole to stop running attacks. And like I said, he can get after the quarterback as well. Not the best coverage guy, but I think that there is a world where he fits really nice into someone's defensive system. For the Chargers here at 13, I usually have them go offensive lineman, but I think a star linebacker could also be a great asset for this football team. At 14, the Minnesota Vikings, I think they have to go offensive line here. Kirk Cousins gets beat up far too much in the NFC North. Really, he shouldn't be getting hit that much because we don't really have transcendent pass rushers in the division outside of Khalil Mack. And to be honest, he's not even the main guy getting after him. It's been Zadarius Smith and Preston Smith that have really just kind of harassed Kirk Cousins in the backfield and put him on his back a fair amount, as well as everyone else in the schedule. Kirk Cousins is a good NFL quarterback. I say this every time I talk about him. He's really, really overhated on, and I think that a guy like Elijah Vera Tucker out of USC here could really help this unit as a passing offense and as a running attack. Dalvin Cook's one of the best running backs in the NFL, and just improving that line, whether it's interior or on the exterior at the offensive tackle position, it could really help Minnesota and what they're trying to do offensively. At 15, the Pats here, they need more skill position players. Jalen Waddle, wide receiver out of Alabama. I know they went out in free agency and spent some money on Kendrick Bourne, Nelson Aguilar. They brought in 2 tight ends, but go out there and get someone who's explosive. Nelson Aguilar is not a long-term fix for this football team, and Jalen Waddle might just be a top 3 wide receiver in this draft class. I could see him being one of the more productive guys in this class, as I've comped him to DJ Moore or Odell Beckham Jr. because of his pure explosiveness and ability to win jump ball situations. I think Jalen Waddle's a beast. Here at 15 to the Pats, I think that no matter who their long-term solution is at quarterback, he can be of use here. And Bill Belichick, he's not a guy who drafts the wide receiver position very well, but in a class like this, it's pretty hard to miss, especially when you've got this much talent at the top of the board. Like I said at the beginning of this video, you guys, if you're new around here to the SFS channel, make sure you head down and click that subscribe button if you guys haven't already. And if you're a subscriber and haven't turned the bell on yet, do so you guys are notified when my website drops tomorrow on Thursday, April 1st, as well as getting notifications for all other fantasy football or NFL draft content that I've got here on the channel. All right, you guys, here at the 16th overall pick, I've got the Cardinals taking Patrick Surtain out of Alabama. I think this is another really, really good corner pick who falls down the board farther than I typically have him going, but with the injury to Caleb Farley and J.C. Horn going 10th to the Cowboys, Patrick Surtain falls down the board just a tad here. So the Cardinals have a huge need at cornerback. It's no secret. Pat P cut this offseason. They did bring in Malcolm Butler, but they need someone young in that secondary. There is far too many good receivers in the NFC West to not address this in the first 2 or 3 rounds of the draft. I really think you should do it in round 1 here while the talent is available. But when you're playing Tyler Lockett, DK Metcalf, Robert Woods, Cooper Kupp, and others in that division, I mean, the 49ers don't really have a alpha wide receiver 1 on their roster, but Deebo Samuel, Brandon Ayuk, those guys are no joke. You have to have guys that can cover. They've only really got one right now, and Malcolm Butler has been known to get beat deep a lot. So I think that while he is a seasoned veteran, there's certainly a way to go about this where you continue to improve that group. I think Pat Surtain out of Alabama could be a stud there at 16. Then at number 17, I've got the Raiders taking Christian Darrisaw, the offensive tackle out of Virginia Tech. Those of you guys that have been around the channel know I'm a big Darrisaw fan. I think he can be an absolute stud in the league. They just brought back Colton Miller, their left tackle, for a 3-year extension out of that 2018 NFL draft class. But outside of Colton Miller, the Raiders cut every single or traded every single one of their other starters on that O-line. They need bodies on there. Christian Darrisaw, he's a big boy. He can move those bodies and help John Gruden play that smash mouth football that he wants to. I think this would be a steal at 17. Then at 18, I'm sticking with my pick for my last mock, the Miami Dolphins, taking Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah, the linebacker out of Notre Dame. I think if there's any coach in the league that can help JOK reach his fullest potential, it is Brian Flores and how well he uses linebackers in his scheme. I think that Brian Flores has to be considered one of the best coaches in the league after what he did with the Dolphins in just year 2 last season. He completely changed the culture of that football team. He has developed each and every single one of the players on that roster and made them better than they were before they came to that franchise. So JOK here, very versatile guy. He can cover the wide receivers, tight ends. Super versatile guy, comes down, he plays hard in the run game. I think he's a really great piece here. And for the Dolphins, who are coached by a defensive-minded guy, this seems like a good pick here at 18. Then at number 19, the Washington football team. This is an interesting one here. I haven't had the football team address this position yet, but I've got them going Zaven Collins, the linebacker out of Tulsa. Also, you guys who've been around here know I love Zaven Collins and his versatility. I think this is another guy who, when you watch his tape, he has literally done everything that you could ask out of an off-ball linebacker. The Washington football team, believe it or not, as good as that defense is, their linebacking core is very, very weak. I think that they could really use a guy like Zaven Collins who can do some coverage. He can blitz. He plays the run game. And he's a sound tackler. I think Zaven Collins might be one of the more electric linebackers in this class. And I think he's a guy that can really make a difference and take that already elite defense in Washington and turn it into a great unit because of how good that front seven could be if they address it this draft. At number 20 here, the Chicago Bears. I've got them going Caleb Farley out of Virginia Tech. He falls way down my board. I usually have him going 9 to the Broncos, but after that surgery, like I said, he slips down a bit because, let's be honest, being healthy and available is quite honestly a skill in the National Football League. Just being available to your team and present on the football field to give your talents to your team is so huge. There's a lot of great players who come to the league and they just don't have the ability to stay on the field, and that ultimately is what kills their careers. Caleb Farley plays the same position as a guy named Jalen Johnson, who the Bears drafted in the 3rd round of last year's draft class. Jalen Johnson was a similar guy. He actually had quite a bit more of an injury history than Caleb Farley does, and the Bears took a chance on him, and now he's their top cornerback on the roster after they cut Kyle Fuller. He had a great rookie season. He's very promising, and I think that after having success with that, the Bears look at that secondary that needs some help. If we're being honest here, they released a lot of guys in that unit, and they're going to need some more talent at the position. I think they look at Caleb Farley on the board here at 20, and they see the great talent, they see the ability, and they pull the trigger on him here at 20. Then number 21, the Colts. I've got them taking Rashad Bateman, the wide receiver out of Minnesota. Every time I make a mock and Rashad Bateman doesn't fall down to my Packers, it makes me a bit sad, but Rashad Bateman, guys, please know this guy's name coming into draft night. He is going to be a star in the league. He is one of the best, if not the best, route runner in this draft class. He doesn't pop off your screen from an athletic standpoint, but he is very underrated as an athlete. I think this guy, I comp him to Devontae Adams all the time. I think that his ability to be aware, I say this as well, just about every video I talk about him, his awareness between himself and his defender and how to run his routes is on another level. This guy is going to be a stud. He's going to separate at an elite level. And for a guy like Carson Wentz, who has had his turnover issues in the National Football League, this is going to be a huge pick and a career difference maker for Wentz and for that Colts organization. At 22, I've got the Tennessee Titans taking Asante Samuel out of Florida State. The Titans just need more talent at the cornerback position. They've got Christian Fulton from last year's draft class. They just brought in Janoris Jackrabbit Jenkins from the Saints, but he's not a long-term solution there. And when you're playing in a division like the AFC South that has a lot of uncertainty, and to be honest, they also have a lot of bad passing defenses outside of the Colts, you look at the potential of maybe having Deshaun Watson back there one day. But other than that, you've got yourself Carson Wentz, who is going to be slinging the rock down the football field. You just have to invest more picks into this secondary. They're not too hot at rushing the passer, but they brought in Bud Dupree from the Steelers to try and help out that phase of the game. I think you just got to invest picks in the back end here and hope that Asante Samuel and Fulton can be the franchise pieces on the outside at the cornerback position. But look, Tennessee's got to do something about their defense. Derrick Henry's great. Ryan Tannehill's underrated. That offense is, from a passing standpoint, with A.J. Brown, they just brought in Josh Reynolds. I think they can be very solid and successful and continue to move forward with what they've done in the past. I think you just got to pump picks into this defense this season. You look at the guys they lost. They lost Logan Ryan this past season, prior to this offseason, and then this year they cut Malcolm Butler and Kenny Vaccaro. They've got a lot of revamping to do, especially on the back end there. And I think Asante Samuel at 22 here is the best cornerback available. Then at 23 here, I've got the New York Jets taking Tevin Jenkins out of OSU. I think Tevin Jenkins is one of my risers as of late. He's a guy who I've typically had as my last tackle going on the board here, but I've actually moved him ahead of guys like Alex Leatherwood and Jalen Mayfield here. I think the Jets could really, really use this for a new quarterback in Zach Wilson, as I mocked at the number 2 overall pick, having Mekhi Becton as his left tackle, and then I think bringing in Tevin Jenkins to be the right tackle is really going to be beneficial for a young quarterback. I think that you have to protect your quarterback to have success in the National Football League. It's really not an option. If your quarterback's on his back, you're not winning football games, is what I always say. I think Tevin Jenkins, he's an underrated athlete. He's a very solid guy in terms of his development and his traits as a pass and run blocker. I think that he's a name that's a little bit slept on, not as well known as some other guys in this draft class, but Tevin Jenkins at 23, I think would be a steal for the Jets, and I think Robert Saleh is going to have this team moving in the right direction. At 24, I think I went with this in my last 3 or 4 mocks. The Pittsburgh Steelers need interior offensive line help. Wyatt Davis or Landon Dickerson have been my consensus picks for the channel here. They have to improve that run game. What killed the Steelers last year was the inability to run the football, so they ended up throwing the ball on short little screen passes as their run game, quote unquote. It didn't work. They became far too predictable. Their offense lost all of its explosion. Big Ben is not as mobile or athletic as he used to be and can't make as many ad-lib plays. You have to address this. James Conner's a free agent right now. You don't really have a true running back on the roster. But to be honest, the running game comes from the offensive linemen and the 5 guys making the push up front. You can have a really talented or elusive back in the backfield, but if you don't have the guys to block for him, it's all for nothing, and they're going to get eaten up anyways, especially in the AFC North with some really solid front sevens. Then at 25, the Jaguars, I've got them taking Christian Barmore out of Alabama with their second first-round pick here. This one, of course, is via the Los Angeles Rams in that Jalen Ramsey deal that they pulled off a couple years ago. Barmore here is just the best pick on the board, or at least at a position of need for the Jags, in my opinion. I think that this guy will do a great deal to help that run game and make some big moves in the AFC South, which has some really great rushing offenses outside of the Texans. You've got Jonathan Taylor in that Colts offensive line to deal with, and then you've got Derrick Henry in that Titans O-line to deal with as well. I think the Jags need to make stopping the run a priority, and a guy like Barmore here at 25 who can plug up those run lanes and take on 2 blockers at once would be a huge asset for the Jaguars. Then at 26 here, I've got the Cleveland Browns taking Gregory Rousseau, the edge out of Miami. I believe I also had this one in a couple mocks ago. I think that Rousseau could really, really turn into a special player, learning from Myles Garrett, a guy who is also a very athletic and long edge rusher that they took first overall back in, I think it was 2017. So Rousseau here, the knock on him has been that he's a raw prospect. He doesn't have a second pass rush move. If he gets stymied with his first one, he's kind of lost and doesn't really know what he's doing after that. But a guy like Myles Garrett, who has had the success that he's had in the National Football League, I think he can take Rousseau under his wing here and really help the Browns take the next step forward as having a front 4 that is unblockable. When you look at teams like the 49ers in 2019 that just overwhelmed players with their front 4 and the linebacking crew that was backing them up, there was so much havoc that they wreaked on opposing offenses. It was ridiculous. If the Browns can insert all of this talent onto the defensive side of the ball, there is no excuse for Baker Mayfield and that offense to absolutely go nuts next year. That offense was crazy efficient last year. The run game was popping off. If you can help that defense take the next step forward here with an elite edge rushing prospect and turn him into an elite player, this will be a big time move for the city of Cleveland. Then at 27 here, this is another important position of need for me. The Baltimore Ravens, I have them taking Joseph Ossai out of Texas. The Ravens have lost a lot of key pass rushers in the last couple seasons. Matt Judon, their best guy last year, in my opinion, outside of Calais Campbell, but that's a completely different position. He left, and he's now a Patriot. Zadarius Smith, just 2 years prior, he leaves, and now he's a Green Bay Packer. The Ravens are losing their top guys. They still have Jalen Ferguson, but you need someone else there. You need some help. Calais Campbell's getting older. That defensive front seven is kind of falling apart in Baltimore. They've got a really, really solid back end, but no matter how good those guys are, you still have to limit the time that the quarterback has to throw and make it so they don't have to cover for 6 or 7 seconds against elite quarterbacks in the National Football League. So Joseph Ossai here, speed rusher out of Texas. I think he can be a very, very productive player for this Ravens defense and help that pass rush get back to what it once was. At 28 here, I've got the Saints taking Jalen Phillips, the edge rusher out of Miami. I think Jalen Phillips is a pretty good fit here. They lost Trey Hendrickson to the Cincinnati Bengals, who is a very underrated pass rusher and actually just had a really, really good career season. So they've got a hole. They have a lot of holes after all the roster cuts they had to make to clear cap space this season. I think Jalen Phillips is the best player at a position of need while also fulfilling scheme fit. In my last mock, I mocked Joseph Ossai here, but a good point was made that Joseph Ossai might not be a big enough prospect to put his hand in the dirt in this 4-3 defense and be a true defensive end. Jalen Phillips, I think, fills this role a bit better, and for a guy who I've also talked about as being a very great player against the run, also fulfills that identity of the Saints defense as being one of the better run stops in the league. At 29 here, my Green Bay Packers take Kadarius Toney, the wide receiver out of Florida. If I was going to describe Kadarius Toney in one word, it would be wow. This guy is a freakish athlete. The things that he does after the catch, and honestly, if you watch some of the routes he runs, it's honestly fascinating. Kadarius Toney is such an incredible raw athletic prospect, and some of his routes, the way that he turns his body and the speed at which he does it is just crazy. He's a bit more of a raw prospect. I wouldn't really call him a true route runner. I think he's more of an athlete and an after contact type guy, to be honest. But Kadarius Toney is a stud for what? Is this my 4th or 5th wide receiver off the board here? This just shows how deep this wide receiver class is. I'd love to see my Packers take him here at 29 or any wide receiver, to be quite honest. And I think that this is the biggest position of need left on the board for Green Bay, maybe other than some interior run stoppers. At number 30 here, the Bills, I've got them going Joe Tryon out of Washington. This is another pick I've liked here recently on my channel. Joe Tryon's a guy who I think doesn't get enough talk, or at least talk about him. He is a guy who can play also not only as a pass rusher, but also in coverage. He's underrated in that facet of his game, and I think that for Buffalo, a team that really needs some insertion of talent at the pass rusher position, they could use a guy like Joe Tryon. He's tall, he's long, and he can get after the quarterback. I think that's really the position they need to make a firm grasp on that AFC East division and to try and make a run at Kansas City, because if you're not getting after Mahomes, you're not beating the Chiefs, although you probably have a better chance now than ever to get after them with all of the offensive linemen that they are missing right now. With that being said, at 31, I've got the Chiefs addressing that offensive line, again going Jalen Mayfield, just like in my last mock draft, the offensive tackle out of Michigan. I ranted about this in my last video. Jalen Mayfield or whoever else is the best offensive lineman at the offensive tackle position on either side will be my pick for the Chiefs the rest of the way this season. The Chiefs have to go offensive tackle. You have to protect Pat Mahomes. You're in a division with a Bosa. You're in a division with Von Miller, Bradley Chubb. Not to mention, other guys can rush the passer too. You have to protect him. He can't have games where he is getting mauled like he did against the Buccaneers. We saw how a guy like Jason Pierre-Paul, who's like 34 years old, was getting after him play after play after play. Ndamukong Suh was getting pressure from the interior of the offensive line. And you had also Shaq Barrett coming and traumatizing Pat Mahomes as well in that Super Bowl. So you have to address the offensive line. It's not an option for Kansas City. Pat Mahomes needs to stay healthy. He's the best quarterback in the league, and he needs to be healthy for the Chiefs to win football games. Then finally here, another pick I've had the same as my last mock. Tampa Bay going Azeez Ojulari out of Georgia. I think Azeez Ojulari as a pass rusher is very similar to Shaq Barrett. I don't think that Azeez is necessarily a guy you want dropping into coverage in a game-per-game basis, but I think he's a guy who can be a very effective pass rusher as a young talent in this rotation. He won't be a starter because, let's face it, Tampa Bay's bringing back all 22 of their guys who started last season, which is the first team in the Super Bowl era to do so. But nonetheless, I think Azeez fills a really nice role here for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and for a group of guys that has some older players in that defense, he could be elevated in a year or two as a solid starter. All right, you guys, that was my most recent mock draft here on the SFS channel. As always, if you guys are new around here, we'd love to have you be a part of this fantasy community and NFL community. So go check out my socials on the top of your screen. And as I mentioned, turn that bell on and subscribe if you haven't already. We've got that website coming out on Thursday the 1st. It's going to be a big deal, you guys. We are going to be doing a lot of awesome stuff this offseason and going into next fantasy season strong. We're getting back into it with fantasy content and more YouTube videos per week next week, since the website is now going to be out officially. So stick around for that, you guys. I can't wait for everything that's going to be going on in the future here with the channel. And we'll see you guys next time. Peace out.